It was a crisp autumn evening when Mark, a diligent accountant, returned home after a long day at work, his mind restless with thoughts of their shared future. He had been saving for months, envisioning the picturesque home where he and his wife Emily would build their life together. The dream was so clear: a white picket fence, children playing in the yard, and laughter echoing through the halls. Little did he know, this vision was about to shatter. Mark stepped into the living room, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the modest space he hoped to transform. The smell of burnt toast filled the air. "Emily!" he called out, expecting her to be in the kitchen. Instead, a heavy silence enveloped him. He noticed her phone on the coffee table, a message light blinking. It was unusual for Emily to leave her phone unattended. Curiosity sparked, and he picked it up, glancing at the screen. His heart plummeted as he read the text from her lover, a man named Jared, his supposed friend. "Oh, can't wait to see you tonight, babe," one read, dripping with intimacy. "Mark doesn't suspect a thing." "He's so gullible," another taunted. Rage coursed through him, his hands trembling. The betrayal dug deep, like a knife twisting in his gut. Times were tough, but this was beyond financial strain. It was personal. In a whirlwind of fury, Mark stormed out of the house, his mind racing. He needed proof. The thought of confronting Emily without undeniable evidence sent a chill of revulsion down his spine. He drove to Jared's apartment, each red light feeling like a countdown to his impending confrontation. These men had conspired against him, building a world behind his back. Arriving at Jared's building, Mark spotted Emily's car parked nearby. Something inside him snapped. He barged into the lobby and marched to the elevator, the air thick with tension. As the door slid open on the third floor, he hesitated. He was about to unearth the truth, but was he ready for the fallout? He approached the apartment, his heart pounding. With every ounce of strength, he kicked the door open. Time slowed as he stepped inside, his eyes focusing on the scene before him. There they were, entwined on the couch, their laughter dying the moment they spotted him. Jared's eyes widened with fear, while Emily turned pale, the color draining from her face. Mark could feel the storm brewing inside him. Well, isn't this cozy?" he spat, voice heavy with sarcasm. The shock morphed into anger, reality setting in. He locked eyes with Emily, every moment of love they had shared flashing like a film reel in his mind. "You were supposed to be my partner, my confidant. What's left of our marriage after this?" Panic washed over Emily as she scrambled to cover herself. "Mark, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." But her voice faltered under the weight of truth. Mark approached slowly, deliberately, purposefully invading their space, his presence suffocating. "Not what it looks like? You're lying in a bed of lies. How could you betray me like this, with him of all people?" He gestured toward Jared, whose bravado had evaporated into an awkward facade of innocence. Emily attempted to sit up, desperation lacing her words. "I didn't mean for it to happen. We just..." But Mark cut her off, not allowing the poison of excuses to bubble up. "You just what? Thought I wouldn't notice? That I was too busy working to care?" Each word dripped with fury, curdling the air. Just then, Mark's phone buzzed violently in his pocket, an incoming call he could scarcely ignore. It was the call he had been waiting for, the lawyer he had spoken to after a sleepless night, contemplating how to protect what was rightfully his. He answered quickly, "Yes, it's me. I want to move forward with the divorce." At that moment, he glanced at Emily and Jared, their faces a mix of disbelief and regret. The tension in the room could be sliced with a knife. "You two will get to enjoy your future together while I start tearing down everything you've built," Mark continued, entirely confident now. As he hung up, the shock in their faces began to morph into desperation. Emily lunged towards him, pleading, "Mark, please, we can fix this. Let's talk about it." But her words fell on deaf ears. He focused on Jared, the man who had duped him. "This is what betrayal looks like, Jared. You think you can take what's mine and get away with it? You're wrong," Jared stammered, backing away as the reality of his downfall crept closer. All those late nights, the lies they had spun together now unraveling before him. Mark, it was just a fling. You don't need to take this to the next level. We can all just forget about it. Forget? You think I can just forget what you've done? Both of you. Mark stepped closer, invading Jared's space. Believe me, I will expose you. And when I'm done, the world will know who you really are and what you've taken from me. The unraveling of his life was only beginning. Little did they know, Mark had just started to reclaim his power. He would manipulate every situation to ensure they felt the weight of their actions, socially, financially, and emotionally. As he turned to leave, he heard Emily call after him, her voice trembling. You can't just walk away, you'll regret this. Mark paused, glancing back at them, a cruel smile forming on his lips. Regret? No. That's the lesson you'll learn today. He stepped through the door, leaving the shattered remnants of their lives behind, his own emotional purge just beginning. The drive home felt surreal, the weight of betrayal lingering in the air like smoke after a fire. Mark turned up the music, drowning out the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. Over the next few days, an intense resolve built within him. He was no victim. He would rise from the ashes of this betrayal, a phoenix reborn, ready to exact his revenge on those who had shattered his world. Mark threw himself into action. First, he engaged a lawyer, preparing to file for divorce. Every time he thought about Emily's laughter and Jared's betrayal, a fire ignited inside him. He meticulously calculated their joint finances, noting every withdrawal she had made. Money spent not on their future, but on clandestine rendezvous masked as business trips or late work hours. During one meeting with his attorney, he learned about the option for discovery. They would be able to uncover all transactions related to their joint accounts. Emily has to account for every penny spent during our marriage, his lawyer explained, an authoritative tone emanating from her. Mark smiled. This was the first step to shifting the balance of power. Days turned to weeks. Mark dove into a new routine that included long hours at work, researching legal precedents, and watching money slip through his fingers with every fraudulent expense Emily had made. But with every dollar he tracked, his internal strength fortified. He wanted Emily to bear the weight of her actions, not just in front of him, but in the eyes of the world. The day arrived for the first court appearance, a mere prelude to the storm that Mark intended to unleash. He felt nervous energy coursing through him as he entered the ornate courthouse, the smell of polished wood and echoing footsteps amplifying his determination. The legal assistant warned him that Emily and Jared were eager to minimize their losses. She might try to negotiate, the assistant said, but Mark silenced her with a determined nod. I'm not negotiating, I want everything. The moment the court session began, he felt a rush of adrenaline. He was no longer the deceived husband. He would emerge as the victor. As the judge entered the room, Mark squared his shoulders, ready to face Emily. When she walked in, her demeanor radiated false confidence. She wore the mask of an innocent victim, hoping the court would sympathize with her. But the way she fidgeted with her ring made it apparent she was anxious. The moment their eyes locked, Mark felt a sense of vindication. She was in his territory now. The proceedings began, and Mark sat through the opening statements, his blood boiling as Emily's lawyer painted her as an unfortunate wife trapped in a loveless marriage. The tale was artfully woven, but Mark's focus remained razor sharp. The world would see the truth. Soon, it was his turn to present evidence. With each photo of transactions showing romantic dinners and hotel stays, he could feel the eyes of the courtroom turn against Emily. The gasps of disbelief were almost music to his ears. Mark exploited the moment, emphasizing the intimacy behind each expense, the manipulation that had preceded each deception. It's despicable, he concluded, raising his voice so it echoed against the polished walls. They think they can get away with this. They believe they can take a man's hard-earned money for their own pleasure and laugh behind his back. Mark smiled grimly as he caught Jared's eye across the aisle. There was a glimpse of panic on his face, and for Mark, it was the most satisfying sight all day. In that moment, he felt the frayed ends of his heart stitched together. "They will pay," he vowed silently. After the session, Mark gathered his things among murmurings of sympathy in the hall. Empathy was flowing from less biased acquaintances, friends who recognized the injustice of infidelity. Yet no one felt the urgency fueling Mark more than him. At home, his anger remastered itself, building to a thunderstorm. The following weeks exhausted Emily. She would call, asking to meet, desperately trying to negotiate terms that suited her. Each time, Mark would entertain her expressions of remorse, but never truly engage, always leaving her in silence after she exposed her fragile state. "Mark, please, I can fix this," she'd plead, but he would only smile coldly before hanging up. The court dates became the single point of interest for Mark. He relished the stirring tension each time he faced Emily. She was increasingly isolated, the whispers of who she was becoming louder. Friends began to distance themselves, and her family expressed disappointment rather than support. The real clincher came the day Mark uncovered a non-disclosure agreement Jared's firm had put together to protect an upcoming merger involving a significant amount of money. He smiled as he realized this was a golden opportunity to leverage against them both. Through his attorney, Mark filed additional documents for the court, exposing the hidden financial crimes and transgressions Jared had committed while sleeping with Emily. When Mark presented the linked web of destruction during the court session, the atmosphere shifted. Gasps ricocheted off the aged walls as judges and lawyers scrambled for decorum. But Mark saw nothing but opportunity. "You're being played," he stated bluntly to Emily and Jared, who now sat next to each other but more isolated than ever. "This isn't just about us anymore. I'll make sure every person in your lives sees you for who you truly are." Mark's emotions reached a boiling point when he received a message from an acquaintance of Emily's. "Just heard the horrible news about you too," the message chirped. It seemed even whispers of her alibi were falling apart. Wrath surged through him, fueling his fire. On the final court date, as the judge looked over the damning evidence, Mark's triumph was cut short when Emily begged for mercy. In a desperate bid to reclaim her narrative, she stood, tears streaming down her face. "Mark, I never meant for any of this to happen." Mark leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "You thought you could break me," he said, eyes aflame with unyielding resolve. "You have no idea the cost of your betrayal." As the gavel fell, Mark realized he had not just fought for his financial stability. He had reclaimed his dignity. He exited the court with a firm stride, removing himself from the shattered pieces of their relationship and stepping boldly into a future that belonged to him alone. Emily, contrary to her attempts at total control, would have to bear the real consequences of her actions, and Mark, through perseverance and strategic resolve, emerged victorious, a completely transformed man, hardened by experience but fueled by integrity. With the court's hammer echoing behind him, Mark strode out into the midday sun, the weight of his victory lighting a fire within him. Every step was calculated, each footfall resonating with the confidence he had rediscovered. Emily's pleas faded into obscurity as he summoned visions of his future, a life free from betrayal, a life of self-made triumph. He devoted his evenings to rebuilding, staying late at work to pursue new clients and opportunities. The office was more than just a place of employment. It became his sanctuary. Mark threw himself into his projects, leveraging his success as a weapon against the shadows of his past. He meticulously recorded not only his professional victories, but also the slow and steady flow of capital accumulating in his personal accounts. He envisioned a house of his own, not a shared fantasy with Emily, but a space where he would redefine himself, a true haven. Mark's life became a cycle of work and self-improvement. He took up jogging to channel his anger into the physical. He signed up for woodworking classes to craft furniture for his future home. Every splinter of wood, every bead of sweat tasted like freedom. The thrill of small victories filled his days, fortifying him against the remnants of his former life. Meanwhile, the fallout from the court case rippled through the fabric of Emily's existence. News spread like wildfire, igniting gossip among friends and colleagues. One afternoon, while at a cafe, Mark caught snippets of conversation from nearby tables. "Did you hear about Emily? She's essentially ruined." Another voice added, "What kind of person cheats on her husband? Especially a good guy like Mark." Each word sliced through the air, serving as validation for the pain he had endured. These public whispers were only the beginning. Emily was becoming a pariah, isolated and alone in the wake of her deceit. Mark delighted in knowing that her choices would not go unnoticed. Friends who once rallied around her began to distance themselves, reflecting on their own relationships in light of her actions. Perfectly manicured social facades cracked, and the reality of her betrayal turned into her own prison. One fateful evening, Mark received a notification that sent a thrill down his spine, an invitation to a reunion with former colleagues. He hadn't seen much of his old network since he'd closed the chapter on Emily, but now it felt like a perfect opportunity to step back into the world and truly own his narrative. They were all meeting at a local brewery, a casual atmosphere ripe for storytelling and connections. As Mark washed his face, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him. He chose a sharp navy blazer, something that stated confidence without arrogance, before he made his way downtown. The familiar streets buzzed with life, but he was a man on a mission, not merely to reconnect, but to showcase the new version of himself. Upon arrival, he was immediately met with warm handshakes and genuine smiles. The atmosphere lingered between nostalgia and curiosity, and conversations flowed naturally. It felt good to be welcomed back, but as the evening progressed, Mark sensed a palpable shift in the tone of his peers. "Have you heard about Emily?" one colleague asked, the buzz of laughter fading from his lips. Mark raised an eyebrow, maintaining his composure. "It's all over town. She's lost her job, and no one wants to be seen with her anymore. It's brutal." A wave of sympathy washed over him, not for Emily, but for the destructive force that her choices had unleashed. "She made her choices," Mark replied, letting the weight of his words sink into the sheer absurdity of the situation. His voice was steady, unwavering. No one deserves to be treated that way. A moment of silence echoed around the table before someone inevitably steered the conversation into lighter waters. Yet, Mark allowed a small smile to tug at the corners of his mouth. Every mention of her downfall felt like a victory bell ringing for him, a celebration of his own perseverance. As fate would have it, Emily crashed the gathering, her presence an eruption among friends who had finally begun to mince their social ties with hers. She walked in, cheeks flushed and eyes darting nervously. The moment she spotted Mark, confusion twisting her expression into one of urgency. "Mark, I wanted to talk." Her voice trembled, cutting across the laughter that had characterized the evening mere moments before. Mark's heart raced, not from fear, but exhilaration. "About what, Emily?" He leaned back against the bar, positioning himself as the calm eye of the storm. "Isn't it a little late for talk? What happened with us? It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you, She faltered, searching for words that felt hollow and superficial to him. But rather than indulging her with sympathy, Mark decided this was the moment to expose her for who she had become. "People have talked, Emily. They've seen you wandering through life like a ghost, a specter of the woman you used to be. What do you think they see?" The realization ignited in her eyes, the weight of her actions mirrored in the judgment of their friends. "You don't deserve this conversation, not after everything." Around the table, Mark's colleagues looked on, eyes widening in shocked understanding. They connected the dots. They moved from alliances to sympathy, with one swift realization of betrayal. "Mark, please, I was lonely. Things weren't right between us," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "Lonely? So you thought which of us held more stakes in this game? You, who threw everything away for temporary pleasure? You can't blame me for your choices." He leaned in, the tension hanging visibly in the air. With mounting confidence, Mark continued, feeling the weight lift from his chest. "This isn't just about us. This is about every person you've deceived in the process. I won't let you rewrite history. Her face fell, stripped of defense. "I'll change, Mark. I can fix this." "Fix what?" he shot back, the edge of the air thick with tension. "You can't fix your character. You made this bed. Now lie in it. People here see you for what you are." The atmosphere shifted, a palpable sense of clarity washing over everyone at the gathering. The glances of disbelief and accountability floated around like soft echoes of the past, reminding all present of Mark's remarkable resolve. As he stepped away from her, he basked in the aftermath of their exchange. He was reborn from ashes, the embodiment of resilience against deceit. The night took on an air of celebration. Mark smiled when he finally walked out, feeling the weight of his own decisions, proud of the path ahead. He refused to forget or forgive, knowing that some wounds would never heal, but rather than making him bitter, they had forged him into something new, something powerful. Mark was more than a surviving husband. He was a man who had declared war on betrayal, ready to embrace a future he could forge alone in strength, dignity, and purpose. The crisp night air felt invigorating as Mark left the brewery and stepped into a new chapter. The exhilaration from confronting Emily pulsed in him like an electric current, fueling his ambitions for the future. He had diligently rebuilt himself after the wreckage of betrayal, and with each passing day, he sensed his emotional winds shifting. What once felt like chaotic gusts of despair were now powerful, enabling forces that propelled him forward. He immersed himself further into work, negotiating contracts and fostering relationships with clients in ways he had never done before. His colleagues noticed the change, viewing him as a powerhouse rather than just a reliable accountant. It was all part of Mark's transformation, a deliberate, purposeful refashioning of his identity. Mark's phone buzzed late one evening as he wrapped up paperwork at his desk. It was a text from an old college friend, Sarah, whom he hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, just checking in on you. Heard the news about you and Emily. If you want to talk, I'm here. How about dinner this week?" He hesitated, considering how much he had repressed personal emotions to focus on rebuilding his life. Still, Sarah was always a good listener, someone who had been there for him during difficult times in the past. After a moment's pause, he replied, "I'd like that. How's Thursday?" The dinner arrived sooner than expected, and Mark found himself increasingly nervous as he entered the modest restaurant where they had agreed to meet. Seeing Sarah's familiar face eased some of that anxiety. She was warm, genuine, and effortlessly engaging, always bestowing kindness and understanding on him. As they settled into a cozy booth, Sarah's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "So, how are you really doing?" she asked, a gentle smile adorning her lips. Mark hesitated for a second, but knew he owed it to himself to be open about the tumultuous year he had faced. "I've been better," he admitted, stirring the ice in his glass. "Emily, well, she betrayed everything we built together. But I'm not here to dwell on that. I'm moving on." Sarah nodded, observing the determination etched into his features. "That takes a lot of strength. I'm proud of you." As they moved through the main courses and desserts, conversation flowed effortlessly between them. They reminisced about college days, shared ambitious dreams, and talked about the paths their careers had taken. It became increasingly evident to Mark how he had coveted the stability of relationships, even when the reality of his marriage to Emily had shattered those ideals. "Mark, have you thought about what you want next?" Sarah asked, her inquisitive expression setting him to think seriously. "Beyond work, are you ready to really put yourself out there again? Find someone?" He took a moment to gather his thoughts. "I haven't really considered dating yet. Honestly, I'm still recovering. I want to build my life, my home, before inviting someone else into it. But it's hard. Sometimes I miss the companionship." "Companionship doesn't mean loss of control," Sarah replied gently. "It might take time, but when you're ready, know that it's okay to seek someone who cherishes you rather than someone who just takes." Those words resonated deeply, combining with the reflections of the past year. Mark understood that the wounds would take time to heal, but hope flickered at the edge of his consciousness. A burgeoning possibility for real intimacy built on trust. As dinner wound down, Mark felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The genuine conversation had realigned his perspective. igniting both ambition and vulnerability he hadn't realized he still possessed. They left the restaurant, plodding through the balmy night air, laughter casting their shadows across the pavement. When they stood outside, Sarah paused, her expression shifting to one of seriousness. "Mark, I'm really here for you, no matter what. Just remember that." The concern in her voice reached him, reigniting a flicker of hope buried deep within. "I know, and I appreciate it," Mark replied warmly, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and recognizing the value of true friendships. Days turned into weeks as they gradually met again, each encounter a door opening into the warmth of emotional connection. Mark didn't rush himself to embrace romantic feelings, but Sarah provided a solace akin to what he had missed for far too long. She never pressured him. Instead, she listened, encouraged, and patiently supported him as he rebuilt. Meanwhile, the aftermath of Emily's downfall continued to play out dramatically. Mark had heard from several mutual friends about her desperate attempts to navigate a shattered reputation. Rumors swirled, not merely about her infidelity, but about the poor decisions she had made in the aftermath. She had lost her job and watched friends drift from her side as if she were toxic. One evening, while at home reviewing work contracts, Mark's phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, he answered. "Mark, it's Emily." The voice trembled through the receiver. "I need to meet. Can we talk?" Confrontation rushed through him as incredulity colored the moment. "Emily, what is there to talk about?" he responded. "I've made mistakes, but I think we can work things out. I want to explain," she pleaded. Mark clenched his jaw. "You don't get to rebuild anything with me now? After everything you've done? Please," she continued. "I know I hurt you, but I want to show you how I can change. I'm seeking help. You were a significant part of my life, and I've been lost without you." He paused, mulling over her words, but his resolve held strong. "Look, neither of us can turn back. The damage is done. You wanted to live in a world where trust didn't matter. I won't be part of that life anymore. Find your path. Give me a chance, please." Mark nearly could hear the desperation seeping through the phone. "No," he stated bluntly. The phone fell silent as he heard her breath hitch, and the realization of finality hit them both. After they hung up, Mark felt a mix of relief and inevitability. He understood that Emily's facade was crumbling. The world would judge her harshly now, something he could only empathize with. But he was not the man who would rescue her from the consequences of her actions. Instead, Mark immersed himself in his continued journey of rebuilding, a journey that had started anew with fresh connections, burgeoning ambitions, and the resilient spirit to venture beyond heartbreak. There was no going back for him now, only forward toward opportunities for genuine love, respect, and personal fulfillment, an uncharted territory he now dared to explore. Ultimately, as he moved resolutely into his future, he embraced the essence of survival, power, and the quest for authentic relationships. For Mark, the storm had passed, and all that remained was the promise of clarity and the sunlight ahead. The weeks flowed into an evolution that felt both exhilarating and daunting. Mark's professional life soared. Contracts were solidified, and clients were singing his praises. He had transformed from a mere cog in the machine to a critical player in the firm, his hard work now recognized and rewarded. Yet amid all this triumph, there existed a delicate vulnerability buried within, a remnants of the scars he carried from his past. His connection with Sarah continued to blossom, each interaction brimming with mutual respect and understanding. They spent leisurely evenings chatting about their lives, sharing ambitions, and perhaps most importantly, laughing, something Mark had almost forgotten how to do in the gloom of his previous marriage. Pushing past the boundaries of friendship felt natural with Sarah. Moments together turned into a safe haven as they grew more intimate in both conversation and understanding. One fateful Friday evening arrived, marking another planned dinner together. Mark dressed meticulously, choosing a fitted navy shirt that complemented his sharp features. As the hour approached, a nervous energy stirred within him. Regaining confidence had not been instantaneous, and the idea of truly moving forward into something possibly romantic both excited and frightened him. When Sarah arrived at the small Italian restaurant Mark had selected, the atmosphere felt warm and inviting. Their conversation flowed seamlessly, punctuated by laughter as they reminisced about silly college antics. Mark admired how Sarah's eyes sparkled when she laughed, sparking something within him, a sense of deepening connection that he had craved for far too long. As the evening progressed, so did the tension of unspoken feelings between them. Between bites of risotto and glasses of rich red wine, they brushed against open topics of dreams and aspirations, personal matters laced with vulnerability. It wasn't just a dinner, it felt like a delicate dance, each step carefully orchestrated, each glance charged with possibility. "Mark, I'm really glad we've reconnected," Sarah said softly, her smile genuine. "You've really come into your own, and it's inspiring to see you so passionate about your work and life." He smiled back, heart racing. "It's been a journey, but I think I'm finally reclaiming a sense of purpose. It's been refreshing to have someone like you to share it with." For a moment, their gazes locked, the air thick with unacknowledged significance. Mark's instincts kicked in. Maybe it was time to take that leap he had avoided for so long. The allure of Sarah's companionship had grown from a pleasant distraction into something much more profound, a palpable connection he felt deep in his bones. He straightened in his seat, heart pounding ever so slightly. "Sarah, I want to be honest with you. I've taken a lot of time to figure this out, but you mean more to me than I realized. I just didn't know if I was ready." The words poured out, the vulnerability resting on his tongue. Sarah beamed back at him, perhaps waiting for this pivotal moment herself. Mark, I felt drawn to you as well. Ever since we reconnected, my feelings have grown. I understand that it's still fresh for you, but I'm willing to take things slow if it means giving us a chance." The significance of her words wrapped around him like a warm embrace. Rejection felt like a ghost of a memory, wholly absent in this moment. Mark nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "Let's explore this together. I'm ready for whatever awaits us." Their fingers intertwined. The simple connection felt electric. The restaurant faded into the background as they reveled in the warmth of each other's company. The rest of the evening dissolved into light banter, sweet laughter, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. They could see clearly what lay ahead, a path paved with authenticity, trust, and the potential of profound companionship. As they walked out together, the world felt different, vibrant, open, alive, open. Mark savored the sensation, understanding that he was no longer haunted by the shadows of his past. The pain from his marriage had crystallized into motivation, fueling him toward an ambitious future, one where he could make choices uninhibited by doubt. Days turned into weeks, and Mark found himself swept into the exhilarating whirlwind of a budding relationship with Sarah. They explored the city together, attended music festivals, and shared long walks in the park, deepening their conversations, now filled with dreams and aspirations as they painted pictures of the future they could envision. But as Mark's life flourished, Emily had begun to spiral. Mark had heard through mutual friends of her desperate attempts to find work, struggling to reestablish herself amid the damage her actions had wrought. The whispers of her attempts to reconcile with former friends only served to amplify the isolation she was facing. Each interaction with her past seemed to end in disdain. One evening, while Mark was enjoying a quiet night in, his phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number, but felt somehow ominous. Hesitating briefly, he answered. "Hello? Mark, it's Emily. Can we talk?" Her voice was strained, crackling with what felt like desperation. "What do you want, Emily?" Mark responded, bracing himself for whatever she would unleash. "I don't want to discuss the past anymore. I've made a mess of everything, and I know that," she said. "But I'm trying to change, trying to find my footing again. I need help." He felt an overwhelming mixture of irritation and indifference swelling up inside him. And why do you think I should help you after what you've done? Your pain is a product of the choices you made. I can't be responsible for your recovery. Please, Mark. I've lost everything, my job, my friends. I'm begging you, just give me a chance to explain. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just need support. Mark sighed, feeling the weight of her sorrow as raw yet unwelcome. Emily, you're on your own. I can't fix what's broken between us. You need to confront your reality without expecting others to clean up your mess. He hung up, a mix of relief and determination flooding through him. Emily's desperate call served as a reminder. Her antics would not disrupt his newfound resolve. His scars would not dictate his future. Rather, he would build his life around strength and self-worth. Diverting his focus back toward the light, Mark found himself emboldened to continue embracing the positive forces in his life. The shadows had receded in the wake of the powerful light he had found through his connection with Sarah, career advancement, and a renewed sense of self. He was living proof that heartbreak could foster resilience, making him aware that real strength comes from having the courage to embrace one's journey regardless of the remnants of the past. And with Sarah by his side, Mark confidently strode toward tomorrow, leaving the ruins of betrayal far behind him. As Mark moved forward, the vibrancy of his new life enveloped him like a warm blanket. He found solace in his career, and the bond he had forged with Sarah blossomed organically. Their relationship deepened, a tapestry of shared experiences and mutual respect woven together. Each laugh, every intimate conversation added threads to their growing connection. Despite the optimism swirling around him, remnants of his past occasionally surfaced, dark and insistent. It was hard to forget that betrayal lingered just beneath the surface, nudging at him during quiet moments. During one of those restless evenings while scrolling through social media, he stumbled upon a post that made his heart sink. It was Emily, her face framed by a desolate backdrop, sharing a long-winded message about rising from the ashes and seeking redemption. The comments were mixed, some supportive, others savage. Mark recognized he still had lingering anger and bitterness. He could see Emily attempting to rehabilitate her image, envisioning a phoenix rising from her tumultuous past. A pang of guilt tugged at him, a whisper suggesting he should feel compassion, but he resisted. She had made her choices, and he couldn't afford to be draped in the shadows of her consequences. The next day, he and Sarah planned to visit an art exhibit downtown. Mark had grown to appreciate the intricate dance of colors on canvases, and he was eager to share the experience with her. As they navigated the bustling crowd at the exhibit, he found himself captivated not just by the art, but by Sarah. Her excitement radiated, illuminating her face as she offered insights and interpretations, breathing life into every piece they encountered. As they stood before a massive, abstract piece full of vibrant hues, Sarah turned to him with sparkling eyes. Art is so fascinating, don't you think? It's like the artist pours their soul out onto the canvas. She paused, contemplating before adding, I wonder what stories they're trying to tell. Mark smiled, entranced by her enthusiasm. Maybe they're telling stories of hope, just like we're writing our own. The weight of his words resonated between them, wrapping them in a shared sense of purpose. After enjoying the exhibit, they decided to grab a bite at a nearby cafe. As they sipped on coffee, Sarah's demeanor shifted slightly. The light dimmed in her eyes, a shadow of concern crossing her face. Mark, there are things I've wanted to talk about but wasn't sure how to bring them up. He raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. What's on your mind? I've seen how resilient you've been through all the pain, but I can't help but feel you carry some burdens. I just don't want you to feel like you have to hide any part of yourself from me. Her voice was sincere, a gentle reminder that vulnerability could exist alongside strength. Mark felt the urge to reveal the remnants of hurt that still lingered, but he hesitated. I appreciate your concern, Sarah. There are parts of this journey that are still healing, he admitted, resting his chin on his hands, his heart racing as he gathered the courage to be candid about his feelings. Sometimes the shadows of our past haunt us, even when we try to move on, Mark continued. I know I'm not perfect, and I'm still navigating the emotional fallout from my marriage. I don't want that to weigh on you. She reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. Mark, we all have histories that shape us, but they don't have to dictate our futures. You don't need to carry that burden alone. Grateful, he squeezed her hand, trusting her insight. Thank you, Sarah. I want to share everything with you, but I also want to make sure my past doesn't overshadow what we're building together. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their hopes and fears, working through the tapestry of their hearts as they opened up to each other. Mark felt a warmth radiate from Sarah as the walls around him began to dissolve. It was a deep and intimate connection, one he had longed for, built on honesty. As weeks turned into months, Mark found energy flowing into his life again. Work flourished, his relationship with Sarah grew more profound, and the chains of the past started to feel lighter. They began to discuss personal goals, dreams of traveling together, a shared vision of the life they sought to build. However, the echoes of Emily's attempts at regaining her life persisted. Each time Mark heard gossip about her struggles, it unnerved him. He knew that reconciliation was not an option after their tumultuous end, but his heart couldn't help but clench at her struggle. One evening, as they settled into his apartment after a long day, the phone rang, breaking the comforting silence. Mark glanced at the screen. It was an unexpected call from a mutual friend, Sophia. Hey, Mark, I hope I'm not interrupting anything, she began, her voice tense. Not at all. What's up? He asked, instantly sensing the underlying urgency in her tone. I just heard about Emily. She was in a car accident. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She's at the hospital, and they're saying it's serious. I thought you should know. Mark felt a whirlpool of emotions. The push and pull of concern clashed with the residual anger he held for her actions. Thank you for letting me know, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. After ending the call, he turned to Sarah, who was immediately attuned to the shift in his mood. What happened? She asked, worry etched across her features. Emily's been in an accident. They're saying it's serious, he relayed, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Sarah took a breath, her expression softening. Are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital? Mark weighed the options in his mind. His instinct was to recoil from the past, but empathy clawed at him, telling him it was right to see her, if only to ensure she faced consequences for her actions. I think I need to, he replied, surprising even himself with the clarity of that decision. After a quiet ride to the hospital, Mark's heart raced as he entered the sterile environment. The fluorescent lights seemed cold and impersonal as he navigated the antiseptic corridors. Emily lay in a hospital bed, bruised and fragile, a stark contrast to her vibrant self. When she saw him, her face paled further, and tears welled in her eyes. Mark, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm so sorry for everything. Mark stood silent, struck by a mixture of compassion and disbelief. Now, despite their past grievances, he saw a person in pain. Emily, what happened? He finally asked, a simple question with tangible weight. I messed up, she said, emotion cracking her voice. I've been trying to put my life back together, but it felt overwhelming. This accident, it was my wake-up call. I need to change. I need help. In that moment, Mark understood. No longer chained to the feelings of anger that had once fueled him, he felt a sense of accountability replace them. Only you can make that happen. It will take time. Finding a path to recovery won't be easy. I know, but I want the chance to do better, she pleaded. Something in his heart softened. He realized he could offer her something she hadn't given him, an opportunity to atone, to become someone worth being. Leaving her that night, Mark returned to Sarah feeling inexplicably lighter. Emily would have to battle her own demons, but he would not be the crutch that enabled her. Instead, he would be the reminder that change is possible, that redemption could spring from wake-up calls that jolted one awake. As he settled into bed beside Sarah, he felt a wave of resilience washing over him. He was finally moving beyond the shadows of betrayal and into the full light of possibility. A journey to be embraced, not just survived. Together, they would continue toward the promise of authenticity, building trust anew. Mark had learned that while the past might shape us, it need not define us. And that was the most liberating truth of all. Days turned into weeks, and Mark found himself navigating a new pattern of life, a balance between healing and hope. The visit to Emily had been an unexpected pivot, prompting the more reflective side of him to emerge. While he was still cautious about reopening old wounds, he felt strangely at peace with the decisions he had made. Each day he awoke with a sense of purpose, a feeling that life was slowly but surely changing for the better. His relationship with Sarah grew deeper, a comforting avenue where they could explore each other's histories and aspirations. They spent weekends exploring local cafes and art fairs, and their evenings filled with deep conversations often culminated in laughter that echoed through their shared experiences. And through it all, Sarah sustained her unwavering support, creating a buffer against any lingering shadows from his past. Yet even as Mark drifted away from memories of betrayal, Emily's progress began surfacing in conversations around their mutual acquaintances. She had opted for rehabilitation and was working to regain a foothold in her professional life. The whispers of her struggles transformed into murmurs of encouragement as she began sharing her experiences with others who had faced similar challenges. The determination in her journey kept bubbling to the surface. One crisp Saturday morning, while Mark prepared breakfast, the phone rang. He answered to hear Sophia on the other end. "Hey, Mark, are you free to talk?" "Sure, what's up?" "I just wanted to give you a heads up. Emily's been speaking at local support groups. It sounds like she's really trying to make a change, but I figured you'd want to know," Sophia informed him. Mark leaned against the counter, contemplating the implications of her words. Hearing that Emily was stepping into the light again stirred mixed emotions. Part of him felt a twinge of pride, acknowledging the effort it took to rise from her past failures. Yet, there was also a lingering discomfort. The connection between them was strained, and he wasn't sure how closely he wanted to observe her evolution. "Thanks for the update," he replied, the words distant in his mouth. "I hope she finds what she's looking for. Are you okay?" "I didn't mean to dig up anything painful," Sophia asked gently. "I'm managing," he said, brushing aside the eeriness her update had triggered. "But I appreciate you looking out for me." They said their goodbyes, and Mark set the phone down, staring off into space. The tenuous thread between his past and present felt more pressing than ever. Moments later, Sarah entered the kitchen, looking radiant, brightening his thoughts instantly. "Coffee?" she asked, pouring herself a mug and leaning against the countertop beside him. "Sure. I just heard from Sophia about Emily. She's speaking at support groups around town, working hard on herself," he said, testing the waters of their discussion. "How do you feel about that?" Sarah's voice resonated with genuine curiosity. She understood the complexity of his journey and the emotional roadblocks that might follow. "I guess a part of me feels proud that she's doing something to rebuild. But another part is afraid of being dragged back into the chaos," he confessed, exhaling a sigh, the weight of concern articulating itself. "Your feelings are valid," she assured him, gripping his arm. "But you're not obligated to get drawn back into her path. Focus on what you're building right here and now." Mark nodded, grateful for Sarah's reassuring presence. Her grounded approach reminded him of the life he had reclaimed. He wasn't just a remote character in Emily's story. He was the architect of his own narrative now. As the days rolled on, he remained steadfast in distancing himself from the past, immersing himself fully in his work and their relationship. Yet, Emily remained a ghost, lingering uninvited at the periphery of his consciousness. Each supportive update from mutual friends only fueled his resolve to not look back. One evening, while finishing up paperwork in his home office, Mark received a text message from Sarah. "What are your plans for next weekend? There's a local craft festival coming up that I think you'd love." He smiled, charmed by her enthusiasm. "I'm in. Sounds like a great way to unwind." As the weekend approached, both Mark and Sarah grew excited about the festival. They planned their day meticulously, anticipating the colors of handcrafted goods and lively music. When Saturday arrived, they navigated through market stalls filled with art, pottery, and handmade jewelry. The atmosphere buzzed with creativity, and Mark found himself captivated by a ceramic booth. He watched as an artisan molded clay into shape, her deft hands working swiftly while sharing stories about her craft. "This is amazing," he exclaimed, completely enthralled. Sarah's laughter echoed behind him, and as he turned, he realized she had picked out a beautiful handmade mug, our eyes lighting up in shared appreciation. "Let's get two, then we can have matching mugs at home," Mark suggested, grinning with contagious excitement. As they roamed from stall to stall, Mark felt the burdens of his past truly begin to lift. He was blinded by the euphoria of the experience, exhilarated by the possibility around him, and embraced the progression of all he had gotten right. Yet, as they turned a corner, he spotted Emily across the street, sharing a laugh with a friend near a food stall. His heart raced, every memory surging back to the surface. Betrayal, heartbreak. So he instinctively pulled Sarah closer. "Mark?" Sarah noticed his sudden rigidity. "Are you okay?" "It's Emily," he said, his voice low, eyes locked onto her. "Oh," Sarah replied, observing his body language. "Do you want to—" "No, I don't want to acknowledge her." "Acknowledge." "Not today," he insisted, his grip tightening on Sarah's arm, grounding himself in the present. "Then let's keep walking," Sarah said gently, leading him away. Mark felt the weight of that encounter linger, thick in the air around him. The sparks of anger intermittently danced through him, but Sarah continued to draw him back to the moment they were enveloped in. It took a moment, but they resumed the day's festivities, laughter returning soon after as they explored confection stalls and sweet delights. Later, as they relaxed on a grassy knoll, Mark felt lighter. They shared bites of artisanal treats, their laughter ringing through the day's final sunbeams as the evening began to settle in. "Promise me this, Mark," Sarah said, her tone earnest as she turned to him. "Let go of yesterday and invest in today. You're building a life, and I'm thrilled to be part of it." "I promise," he replied sincerely, feeling an intense resolve. There was no sense in dwelling on the past. It was the present that needed nurturing. As he leaned back against the grass, Mark gazed at the starlit sky that emerged overhead, feeling the bonds of loyalty around him, those who truly mattered. He had emerged like a sculptor, capable of reshaping his journey, now fully embraced in the creation of his transformative narrative. In every heartbeat, he reaffirmed his decision to move forward, fully aware that he could leave Emily's shadow behind him. With Sarah by his side, he realized that the future held boundless possibilities, a canvas waiting for vibrant strokes of authenticity in the artwork he would continue to create. Overcoming turbulence had not just changed him, it had molded a new foundation for what was yet to come. The weeks following that memorable day at the craft festival turned into a whirlwind of shared experiences and blossoming intimacy between Mark and Sarah. They grew closer, weaving their visions of the future together, a tapestry of dreams that promised a wholesome commitment. Forging this new connection came with its own set of challenges, but they faced them with laughter and open communication. Mark began entertaining the idea of having a sustainable personal life, one built on trust, integrity, and shared values. Sarah's infectious passion for community involvement inspired him, pushing him to engage in local charities and initiatives. Together, they volunteered at food banks and participated in tree planting events, cultivating not just their bond, but a sense of purpose that enriched their lives. Yet, while he focused on this new chapter, shadows of his past occasionally made uninvited appearances. He saw Emily re-emerging in stories shared by friends or subtle reminders that prickled the edges of his thoughts. Each mention threw him momentarily off balance, but Mark practiced grounding himself, reminding himself how far he had come. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling day of volunteering, Mark arrived home to find Sarah already there, bustling around the small kitchen. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, giving it an inviting warmth. "I hope you're hungry," she called out cheerfully. "What's on the menu?" Mark asked, stepping into the room, his heart lightened by the sight of her cooking. "I've been experimenting with a new recipe, stuffed peppers. I thought it might be a fun treat for both of us," she replied, flashing a radiant smile. As they prepared dinner together, they exchanged playful banter. Mark admired the way Sarah danced around the kitchen, moving in sync with a particular playlist that filled the space with a welcoming vibe. It didn't take long for their laughter to echo against the walls, and he realized moments like this reminded him of everything he wanted. After dinner, they settled on the couch, surrounded by an array of pillows and a cozy blanket. They streamed a movie, sharing popcorn as they cuddled up against each other. Halfway through the film, while the characters navigated their own hurdles, Mark turned to Sarah, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Hey, can I ask you something?" he said, halting the lighthearted atmosphere for a moment. "Of course." "What's up?" she replied, her attention focused on him. "What do you think about moving in together? I mean, eventually?" He clarified, gauging her reaction. "It feels right, especially with how good this is." The question hung in the air, and he could see her excitement flash in her eyes. "Wow, really? I would love that," she exclaimed, a smile breaking across her face. "I assumed that was down the line. It feels amazing that we're on the same page." His heart soared at her enthusiastic response. "I don't want to rush things, but I know what we have is special. I think sharing a space would only amplify that." "Absolutely. We can make it our own." "I love the idea. I can already picture how we can decorate together," she beamed, her enthusiasm infectious and soothing. They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming ideas, imagining how they would blend their lives through decorations, chores, and all the trials and joys of cohabitation. It felt natural, the whole conversation filled with excitement, and Mark knew that moving in together would mark a beautiful new chapter. However, despite this burgeoning joy, a pang of anxiety simmered slowly beneath the surface. With each step forward, he still feared the shadows of his past, as two lives became one, leaving Emily's tumultuous history behind. Days later, as Mark's mental landscape began to solidify with commitments to move forward, he received another unexpected call from Sophia. "Hey Mark, can we chat? It's about Emily," she said, her tone more serious than before. "Sure, what's going on?" "Emily reached out to me again. She wants to apologize to you in person, and I'm really not sure how to approach this. She's come a long way in her recovery, but I thought you'd want to know she's trying to reach out," Sophia explained. Mark felt his heart skip a beat, a mix of frustration and curiosity swirling within him. "What does she want?" "I've moved on, Sophia. I don't want to be dragged into her world again." "I know, but she seems genuinely remorseful and wants to make amends," Sophia replied carefully. "I just thought it would be fair to let you make the choice. You've both been through a lot, and moving forward might mean addressing the past for closure." "Closure, huh?" he murmured, contemplating. "To be honest, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I feel like reaching out to her could just unlock old pain." "Just think about it, okay? It's your call," Sophia replied before cutting the call. He sat at his desk, conflicted about what this all meant. Underneath the surface of their lingering discontent, Mark resisted the notion of vulnerability and found himself craving the comfort of his soaring sentiments with Sarah instead. For the next couple of days, he tried discussing the matter with Sarah, but the opportunity never seemed to arise. As they worked through dinner plans or joined friends for social activities, he hesitated to bring her into the delicate web of his past. One night, after returning home from dinner with friends, Mark finally took a deep breath and turned to her. "Sarah, can we talk? It's about Emily." Her warm eyes settled on him, understanding the weight of his words. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I got a call from Sophia. Emily wants to meet in person to apologize, and I'm not sure how I feel about it," he confessed, resuming fighting the internal conflict. "Do you want to meet her?" Sarah asked gently, her tone encouraging rather than judgmental. "Or are you feeling pressured?" "No, it's not pressure. I don't know if engaging with her would peel away the progress I've made." "That's understandable," Sarah replied, placing her hand on Mark's arm, grounding him. "You've worked hard to get to where you are. It's okay to say no. But if you want to meet her for closure, what would that look like for you?" Mark mulled over her words, surprised by the insight embedded in her question. "It would mean finally cutting that chapter for good, wouldn't it? It's like closing the door properly on the past, confronting it one last time. Then, if that's your heart's desire, do it. Just know I'll fully support whatever decision you make, she reassured, her tone enveloping him like a warm embrace. Her faith in him provided clarity. Often, it was easier to simply let the past fade into obscurity. However, confronting what haunted him could empower his journey in ways he hadn't anticipated. I think if I approach this with honesty, I could emerge unscathed, he resolved, feeling somewhat lighter. Days later, after coordinating schedules, Mark prepared himself for the meeting with Emily. They decided to meet at a park, somewhere neutral where he would feel less constrained, surrounded by nature. As he approached the small open area, he spotted Emily sitting on a bench. The sight of her brought an unexpected rush of emotions flooding back. Anger, disappointment, but also a flicker of empathy. She looked different. The weight of her experiences had carved lines of accountability into her features. "Hey, Mark," she greeted softly, her eyes glistening. "Emily," he replied cautiously, finding his footing as he took a seat across from her. Taking a deep breath, Emily began, "Thank you for meeting me. I know I don't deserve your time, but I deeply regret my actions. I've spent so much time reflecting on everything." He listened, allowing her to speak but guarded against her words. "I've made terrible choices and they hurt so many people, especially you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to take responsibility for the pain I caused." Her voice trembled, sincerity radiating from her. Mark found the openness in Emily disarming. He couldn't let old wounds overpower the progress he fought for. "I appreciate your willingness to acknowledge this, Emily, but words alone can't undo the damage you've done." "I know that," she nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "But I wanted to at least tell you that I'm working hard on myself, and I want to learn from my mistakes. I don't ever want to be in that dark place again." Mark sensed the authenticity behind her words. "You can't change the past, and I cannot agree to rebuilding any part of our history. But I wish you well in your journey toward recovery," he replied, allowing closure to settle between them. They shared a moment of silence, the weight of everything acknowledged. "Thank you for being honest with me. I truly am sorry for what I did," Emily said softly, lifting her gaze to meet his. "I'm glad you're seeking help. That's the first step," Mark replied, the heaviness in his heart gradually lightening. As they stood to leave, he felt a gentle weight lift off his shoulders. Stepping away from the past, he reaffirmed his commitment to embracing the present and pursuing the future he envisioned with Sarah. "Take care, Emily," he said, a finality resting in the air. In that moment, Mark truly released the past. He walked away from the bench, stepping into the sunlight, into a new chapter, one filled with promise, growth, and the beacon of a genuine love that awaited him. As Mark walked away from the park, he felt an unexpected surge of relief wash over him. The meeting with Emily had unraveled a knot that had been tightly wound in the back of his mind for so long. That chapter, fraught with pain, betrayal, and turmoil, was finally closed. A wave of fresh air enveloped him as he headed home, knowing he was moving forward without the burden of unresolved feelings dragging him down. Arriving at his apartment, he found Sarah lounging on the couch, engrossed in a book. She looked up as he entered, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. "Hey, how did it go?" Mark took a moment to collect his thoughts before answering. "It was intense, but good. I think we both needed it." "Did you feel like you got what you needed?" she asked, putting the book down and giving him her full attention. "Yeah," he replied, his heart lighter than it had been for what felt like ages. "I was able to express how her actions affected me, and I finally feel ready to leave it behind for good." Sarah smiled, empathy radiating from her. "I'm proud of you, Mark. That's so important. You should feel proud of yourself for taking that step." "Thanks, Sarah. I couldn't have done it without your support," he admitted, soaking in the warmth of her encouragement. As they settled into their evening routine of cooking dinner together, he couldn't shake the feeling of newfound freedom that enveloped him. The air felt lighter, their laughter more contagious, and the walls of their kitchen resonated with bright energy. He enjoyed sharing these moments with Sarah. Preparing meals together allowed them to strengthen their bond, the simple process imbued with love and care. Later, they plopped down in front of the television, their favorite show streaming, their bodies snugly intertwined beneath a shared blanket. He stole glances at her as they watched, mesmerized by how her eyes sparkled in the soft glow of the screen. Each moment felt precious, a stark contrast to the darkness of the past he was shaking off. "Hey, Mark," Sarah said during a commercial break, breaking the comfortable silence. "What do you think about taking a weekend trip soon, just the two of us?" His interest piqued immediately. "Where do you want to go?" "I was thinking about a cabin in the mountains. Just to escape for a bit, enjoy nature, and recharge together," she suggested, a hopeful smile brightening her features. "That sounds amazing. We could do some hiking, maybe sit outside by a fire at night," he replied, envisioning the scenic landscape and peace amidst nature. "Exactly. I think it would be great for both of us. It'll give us a chance to disconnect from everything else swirling around us and reconnect with each other," she added, eyes twinkling at the thought. "That sounds perfect," Mark agreed. "I'll look for some cabins we can book." With their plans set in motion, Mark felt a surge of anticipation. The idea of escaping into nature together ignited a whirlwind of excitement within him. It was a reminder that life was brimming with possibilities, and he was finally ready to embrace them. The following week became a flurry of activity as they prepared for their trip. They packed their bags with cozy clothes, hiking gear, and snacks for the road. The energy between them crackled with excitement as they contemplated their time away, a refreshing break from their everyday hustle. After a long drive marked by laughter and spirited conversation, they arrived at the cabin nestled in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and a serene lake that shimmered in the sunlight. Mark immediately felt relaxed. The fresh air invigorated his spirit, while the sounds of nature enveloped him. "This place is incredible," Sarah exclaimed, spinning around to take it all in. "It really is," Mark echoed, taking in the beauty surrounding them. They stepped inside the modest cabin, the rustic charm welcoming them as they settled in. Over the next few days, they hiked through scenic trails, the laughter shared along the way echoing between the trees as they ventured deeper into the wilderness. They trekked up hills that rewarded them with breathtaking views, paused to capture countless photographs, and even shared quiet moments building a small fire by the lake under the star-studded sky. As the sun melted into the horizon, they gathered around the crackling fire, the warmth contrasting against the cool evening air. With drinks in hand, conversations flowed effortlessly. This felt like an oasis of peace, one that allowed them to check in with themselves and with each other, a perfect escape into their own little world. "Mark," Sarah said suddenly, breaking through a lull, "I know we've talked about our future, but I want to share something that's been on my mind since we started dating." The sudden seriousness of her tone piqued his attention. "What's on your mind?" "I want you to know that I'm all in. Whatever happens, I want you to know that I see a future with us," she said earnestly, the flickering flames mirroring the warmth in her eyes. His heart swelled at her words. "I feel the same way," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I'm ready to build a life together. You have no idea how much it means to have you by my side." In that moment, the vulnerabilities of their pasts melted away, leaving them standing on the precipice of a bright new future. They smiled at one another, the closeness between them expanding. Mark leaned forward, capturing Sarah's lips in a soft kiss, the connection between them solidifying. Time stretched as they lingered in the embrace, words unnecessary. Everything felt right in that moment. Despite the trials they each faced in the past, they had arrived at this oasis together. Each had brought more than scars. They had brought courage and commitment to craft something beautiful. Later that night, as they nestled in the cabin under the canopy of stars, Mark felt a sense of deep fulfillment blooming within him. With every breath of fresh mountain air, he seemed to detach from the chains of his past, realizing he stood at a new beginning, one defined by possibility, joy, and love. Emboldened by their shared vision of the future, Mark felt invigorated, understanding that their connection could only grow stronger. With Sarah, he was no longer shackled by memories shrouded in betrayal. Instead, he was forging a new legacy, one that celebrated resilience and the power of love to heal. Together, they embarked on the journey toward the life they both envisioned, step by step, hand in hand, into the promise of tomorrow.